there was actually a question that I wanted to answer, and this was a question that was actually part of a statement that I had made last Sunday that I wanted to give a scripture for, and that was I had made the statement last Sunday that there was a passage of scripture that stated that for women and children to rule a nation, that was actually a judgment from God. And I had mentioned that I'd wanted to find that particular passage to share with you all. And I did locate that passage. It's actually in the 3rd chapter of Isaiah. So I just wanted to briefly point this out to you, and then you can study this on your own to draw your own conclusions, because I do not want to pull out just a certain passage of scripture and make it say something that it should not say. But in Isaiah, the 3rd chapter, and the very first verse, the first verse through the 12th verses, Isaiah says this. It says, "For behold, the Lord of hosts, doth take away from Jerusalem and from Judah the stay and the staff, the whole stay of bread and the whole stay of water, the mighty man and the man of war, the judge and the prophet and the prudent and the ancient, the captain of 50 and the honorable man and the counselor and the cunning artificer," apologize for that, "and the eloquent orator," which is not me. "And I will give children to be their princes, and babes shall rule over them." Okay, so far to me, this sounds like this is a curse that's being put upon the nation. All right, read on. "And the people shall be oppressed, every one by another, and every one by his neighbor. The child shall behave himself proudly against the ancient, and the base against the honorable. When a man shall take hold of his brother of the house of his father, saying, Thou hast clothing, be thou our ruler, and let this ruin be under thy hand. In that day shall he swear, saying, I will not be an healer, for in mine house is neither bread nor clothing. Make me not a ruler of the people. For Jerusalem is ruined, and Judah is fallen, because their tongue and their doings are against the Lord, to provoke the eyes of his glory. The shew of their countenance doth witness against them, and they declare their sin as Sodom, they hide it not. Woe unto their soul, for they have rewarded evil unto themselves. Say ye to the righteous, that it shall be well with them, for they shall eat the fruit of their doings. Woe unto the wicked, it shall be ill with them, for the reward is of his hands shall be given him. As for my people, children are their oppressors, and women rule over them. O my people, they which lead thee cause thee to err, and destroy the way of thy paths. All right, and that's just the Isaiah, the 3rd chapter, the 1st to the 12th verses. Now, I would invite you to read that entire chapter, Isaiah, the 3rd chapter. But if you read that entire chapter, to me, it reads as though there is a pronouncement of a curse or a judgment upon the nation for not following after the Lord. And as part of that pronouncement or judgment upon that nation, it's saying that children are their oppressors and women shall rule over them. All right, and this was going back into a discussion that we had last Sunday where we were talking about the role of men, the role of women, the role of children, etc., and how nowadays those roles have become blended. And although you may have a situation where a woman can do a man's role, or I gave the example last Sunday of where you can even have a child do a woman or a man's role, just because someone has the ability to do that role doesn't mean that they're necessarily should perform that role. And here in Isaiah, the 3rd chapter, it appears from the way that I interpret this particular passage that it is actually a curse for children and women to rule over a nation. Now, we do have examples of women and child leaders, but if you look at those examples and the conditions of the nation at that time, those examples where women were in leadership positions, it was during a time where the nation was in spiritual demise. Case in point, when we talked about Judges last Sunday, Judges, the 4th chapter, one of the first judges was a judge named Deborah. She judged the people. But what was going on in the land of Israel at the time, every man did that which was right in his own eyes. So that was during the time where the land of Israel was in spiritual demise. Also, if you look at when children ruled, and you had some good leaders. You look at a time where there was this child named Josiah who wound up being a very good king. He was 8 years old when he began to take rule over the land of Judah. But if you study the scriptures carefully, he was not an effective ruler until he was 26 years old. It wasn't until his 18th year that he began to tear down the houses of the Sodomites, tear down the high groves, and do those things after one of his priests had discovered the scriptures hidden away in the temple. And even then, they had to consult a woman by the name of Huldah, Huldah. You can look this up in 2 Kings 22, I believe. I have to go back and find that. 2 Kings 22. You can go back and read that when you have time. Even then, they had to consult a woman to find out what God wanted them to do at that time before Josiah began to act. And he didn't act until he was 26 years old. So once again, you had women in power, you had children in power, but it was during a time where the nation was in spiritual demise. So is that okay? All right. But once again, I'm not trying to project or pass my own opinion upon what I feel the scriptures are actually saying. So that's why I recommend that you go back, read Isaiah the 3rd chapter for yourself. If you have an opportunity, you may also want to read Jeremiah 22:29, Jeremiah 22:29 through the 31st verses, Hosea 5 and 7, and as well as 2 Kings 22 that talks about Josiah, and you can arrive at your own conclusions. That would probably warrant a separate Bible study. All right? But that's just a little background on children and women being in rulership and being in leadership roles over a nation. All right? And that's where I got that from, which is out of Isaiah, the 3rd chapter. Okay?